Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Talking Smack. I am your host, Josh Scar. We're talking superheroes, movies, animation, and comics. With me this week is Derek. Welcome back, Derek.
Hello again.
And this week we are talking a lot of DC because obviously Justice League came out this week and we saw it. So we will share our thoughts and opinions on that a little later. But as always, we're going to start with news. Star Wars Battlefront II has launched today as we are recording this, so we will say this weekend. We have obviously not had a chance to play this yet. We might be doing a review next week, depending if we can get our hands on copies at not full price, because fuck EA.
Yes.
They have temporarily turned off the in-game purchases because they want to balance the game and see how people react to this, because obviously the massive amounts of in-game purchases that they are throwing into this game have affected fan response.
Yeah, from what I read, to get the same stuff without paying, you have to grind. I think someone calculated it's like 4,000 hours. If you calculate the wait time too, because they're like, you'll do stuff and then they'll actually put in a wait time. Like, oh, you can't do this again for another 3 hours.
That's ridiculous. And I know that people were griping about a lot of stuff because they had the EA early access for some of these things. Darth Vader was some ridiculous amount of gems or credits or whatever currency they have in the game. I think it's gems. Crystals.
Yeah.
So EA reduced the value of Darth Vader, or the cost of Darth Vader, to like 75%. But they countered that with, they made it so you earn less crystals.
They just scaled both back.
Yeah, which is...
Like, it didn't really actually do much.
Yeah, it's basically just a middle finger. Like, hey, look, he's cheaper, but it's going to still be just as hard to get him.
And they also lowered the amount that you would receive for completing the story missions, too. They lowered the amount that you receive at the end.
Well, yeah, because the campaign is one of the reasons a lot of people like you and I want to buy this game. Well, I'm not buying it. I'm going to see if I can't rent it.
I almost bought it, and then I just canceled the reservation after reading everything and then realizing my own mistake in the first place.
Of all places that gave it a bad review, Game Informer gave it a 6.5, and that seems largely because of the in-game purchase system that they have built into the game. Mm-hmm. And they set the title of the review is The Dark Side of Gaming, because they have all of these in-game purchases that and microtransactions. And I know a lot of people are actually talking that this is borderline gambling because you're not guaranteed anything that you put your money into.
And see, that's the thing too, is a lot of people are trying to say that like loot boxes are a form of gambling in games, and they're all petitioning to have the ESRB say that, like change their like grading system or like their classification system, but they can't. Like the ESRB said they can't, like that's not their jurisdiction. That it's actually you have to go to the commission of like gambling or whatever, and you have to do your petition there if you want them to change it, because they're the ones that would classify loot crates in video games as gambling.
Not the loot crate vendor or retailer.
No, like actual, like say like in Destiny or something,
or Mass
Effect, yeah. And it's kind of ridiculous, because then if that commission then classifies it as gambling, then the ESRB can change their
if the
system.
The gambling commission classifies it as gambling, they technically can't put that in the game because gambling is illegal outside of Las Vegas and certain little areas. So if they wanted to have a national or worldwide release, they can't put those kind of gambling sequences into their game, because you're using real money to gamble to try and get Darth Vader or, you know, a TIE Defender or something. I don't think the TIE Defender's in the game, but you get my point.
It's all just ridiculous. And then the fact that they are retracting them right now, pretty much it's just to bait people into thinking, oh, we're taking them away, just to get people to buy the game.
Yeah, because they said they're just going to reevaluate. They're not they're not even completely taking it out of the game. They just said they will look into the matter at another time.
They're going to bring them back exactly how they are currently. They're just waiting until people can no longer get rid of or return the game beyond trading it in somewhere.
If people fall for it, I mean, they fell for it. We're not falling for it. We're going to go rent it and give Redbox or whatever other rental service has the means, and they'll just get a small percentage of the rental cost.
It's just sad, just because graphically it looks awesome, And I've just been waiting so long to have like a decent, good-looking, modern Star Wars game, because the last games that really come out of any note were like the Force Unleashed games, which the first one is obviously better than the second. I mean, those were the last like big releases of decent Star Wars games that I remember personally.
Yeah, and in other EA Star Wars news, since they have the license, I think they have the license for Star Wars games through 2020 or 2021. They did recently just buy Respawn, the team that was behind the original Call of Duty Modern Warfare games and the new Titanfall games, 1 and 2. They are now working on a new Star Wars game, but EA needs to just get their shit together, because they've had these licenses since, I think, 2015 or 2016 now, and they've published 2 games.
Well, in my opinion, they have their shit together. This is all intentional.
They want to monetize it. They want to make
Exactly.
sure that they can do their microtransactions and make the
They're
most
gonna
money out of
squeeze
it.
as much out of it as they possibly can. So they're gonna be releasing them at their own pace until they feel they can no longer get as much out of the game.
Well, the problem is they're running out of time. They only have 3 years left on that rights agreement, and then if Lucasfilm and Disney have any brains, they'll either bring back LucasArts and have a devoted team of people making video games again.
Please.
please. Or they will auction this out and make more money for someone to publish it. And I mean, you really only have EA and Activision that are significant players in the big publisher, video game publisher bandwagon. I mean, you have other places like Ubisoft, but I don't think Ubisoft could make a really good Star Wars game.
No, thank
Personally,
you.
I don't think Activision could either. I think they would just end up falling in. They would just have a copy and paste cycle like a Call of Duty style game.
Yeah, when I had first heard that they were getting rid of LucasArts, it just made me sad, because there's a lot of people who like thoroughly enjoyed some of the older like computer Star Wars games, like my most favorite being Jedi Knight, Jedi Outcast 2, and then the subsequent Jedi Knight, Jedi Academy. Like those to me are some of the best Star Wars games that you could probably play next to like Knights of the Old Republic and such.
I want to play a good Star Wars game, and I mean, Visceral was supposed to be making a really good single-player Star Wars game, but I guess either budgetary reasons or the fact that the game was just not on schedule and it was just starting to cost too much money, the Visceral Games Star Wars game was canceled, and then obviously Star Wars 1313 was canceled. I don't know what's so hard about trying to get this Star Wars video game franchise off the ground.
And in my opinion, the Visceral Star Wars game was just canceled mainly just because it didn't have the implementation of like monetization.
Yeah, it was strictly supposed to be a solo campaign along the lines of like Uncharted.
Yeah.
As far as how it handles
where like
and how
you
it
could
played.
just actually play the game and unlock things instead of having to pay for it.
Exactly. Unfortunately, that's the side of gaming that we're in now, and I'm very glad I'm not as into gaming as I was because of this sort of stuff. I played Destiny 1 a lot, and once they implemented the microtransactions to like buy different dances and skins for your gun, purely aesthetic stuff that had no impact on the game, and they were charging you money for this, like $5 for these things. It's ridiculous. Speaking of ridiculous, James Franco and Simon Kinberg are working on a Multiple Man movie. For those of you who are not familiar with Multiple Man, he is a mutant in the X-Men universe who basically just can create copies of himself. They are not holograms, they are literal physical copies of himself. His personal name, his like human name is Jamie Madrox. He showed up in X-Men 3, played by a Grey's Anatomy actor, apparently. It sounds like something James Franco would do. I personally have no real interest in this.
It doesn't seem very interesting, honestly. Maybe it's just because his character hasn't been fleshed out much for very many people to see.
We were joking about this after we saw Justice League, and we were talking about all these other things going on where James Franco's buddy is Seth Rogen, and we were talking about how Seth Rogen could show up as Morph. For those of you who don't know, Morph is a really big cornerstone piece of Wolverine's story in the 90s X-Men animated series. And if it's going to be completely ridiculous, just have Morph show up and, you have a guy that can create copies of himself and you have a guy who can change into whoever. Mm-hmm. And I have no interest in this movie. I don't care much for it. I guess it speaks to how much Marvel or Fox's Marvel division of people really enjoy working with Simon Kinberg, that he's actually working on this as well as the Dark Phoenix movie. It's whatever. It's James Franco. It'll be weird, and maybe people will enjoy it. Maybe people won't.
I probably won't watch it.
It depends on how well the podcast is doing. If I have to go see it for the podcast, then I will. But I think this will be a pass for me. Yeah, there's that news. And then we had the Rampage trailer debut this week, which debuted alongside Justice League. It looks fun. It looks like it could be fun bad.
Yeah.
It doesn't look like it's going to be any kind of like world beater, but it looks kind of along the lines of a Pacific Rim.
Just like a fun standalone action movie,
which they will surely make sequels of if they can.
Probably.
I was joking when we saw the trailer that it looks like The Rock literally just went and filmed this right after filming Jumanji.
Yeah.
He didn't even bother changing his costume.
Yep, like he was in Jumanji and then got like sucked into some other portal, was doing Rampage and then got sucked back into Jumanji or something.
Yeah, and which is fine. I mean, Jumanji is probably going to be awful and not make any money. There's a reason they're releasing it in December, a week after Star Wars comes out, or a week and a half after Star Wars comes out, because that's where movies go to die, is to go play against Star Wars.
Yeah, it looks okay, but I mean, I obviously I don't think it's going to do as well as the original Jumanji.
Yeah, no, definitely. There's apparently a Robin Williams cameo in there, but
really.
Yeah, well, not like a Robin Williams cameo, but like an homage where I guess the treehouse that his character lived in and between the time jump is going to be referenced, or it's going to be a plot point or something. But yeah, they're paying a homage to Robin Williams in the previous movie. I know in the first trailer, a lot of people were freaking out, like, how does this become a video game? And the newer trailer shows the original box game.
Yep.
And so obviously, somehow through the magics of that enchant the board game, it mutated into an Atari.
I mean, that's kind of what would make sense to me, because I mean it's like a magic game, so I mean you kind of have to roll along with it.
No pun intended, rolling the dice. My thought process on it was that there are more than one version of the game. But I also, when I saw the first trailer, I thought it was like a new standalone Jumanji. I thought it was like a reboot, whereas apparently it's just kind of a continuation, but also a reboot. Okay. So the events of the first movie happened, and maybe they'll actually reference it, maybe they won't.
Yeah, I thought it was a complete reboot. I didn't know that they did that for Robin Williams.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they did that, and. So when like I said, when I first saw the trailer, the very first trailer is like, okay, so it's a reboot and they'll just homage Robin Williams or pay respects to him. But now that I've seen the new trailer where they show the original box, it shows that, okay, so the first movie did happen and it's now found its way into other hands. My big question as far as this goes is, how much Jack Black and Kevin Hart can people actually handle in one movie?
Yeah, I don't know. I think like seeing Jack Black like impersonate like a teenager college girl, I mean, I think I could listen to it for only just so long, and then it just would get old or annoying.
Well, I think Jack Black's pretty annoying to begin with, so I just
fair enough.
I don't have any real expectations for this movie, and I don't care to see it. If it's on Netflix when my daughter's older, maybe I'll watch it with her, but I don't care.
Yeah, and I definitely probably would just watch it on Netflix if it's there.
Yeah, and so anyway, back to the main topic. Rampage looks like a lot of fun. You've got the giant wolf, you've got the giant monkey. My only complaint is that they all seem pretty small.
Yeah, I thought the same thing. Like, to me, I thought, like, in Rampage, I thought they were supposed to be, like, huge.
They're supposed to be building size. Like, they're supposed to be able to...
Like, bigger than King Kong huge.
Yeah, at least in the original, because obviously in the new King Kongs, he's very much bigger, and he's going to get even bigger come King Kong versus Godzilla. But I mean, the giant crocodile looks pretty big. So, but
Yeah.
that's my concern, is that it's going to end up being the wolf and the gorilla team up to take on the crocodile.
But
and
see,
then
there's
a fourth one.
Yeah, there was 4 in the original game, but I can't remember what the 4th one was. I feel like it was like avian or something, because they had the monkey, they had the wolf, they had the lizard.
Let's take a look. You have George the gorilla.
Okay.
You have Lizzie the lizard.
All right.
Ralph the wolf.
All right.
And Larry the rat. Apparently there were more.
Oh.
They remade it. So let's see.
Oh.
The original 1986.
I was gonna say, it's been a while since I played the game.
Yeah, the original Atari 86 had a rat for the Atari Lynx version.
Okay.
Other than that, it was actually only those 3 originally.
Oh, okay.
You had Ralph the wolf, Lizzie the lizard, and George the gorilla.
Maybe it will just be a 3, because that would be a little disappointing, just having one giant rat.
But it's and then it's gonna be George and Ralph the wolf team up against the lizard, which I guess is fine. But it
looked like, though, that George and what was it for the wolf? Ralph. It looked like they were fighting, though, for a little part of the trailer.
Yeah, it looks like they're gonna, because of whatever's making them grow, is gonna make them like Hulk out, and they have no control over their rage, and they're just bashing into everything because they have no other means of letting out this rage. But I'm sure at some point The Rock is gonna get in touch with George doing his gorilla sign language, and George is going to calm down and get the wolf on his side, and they're going to go take out the lizard, because the lizard's going to eat and destroy everything.
Yep.
But whatever. As they do. But whatever. It's going to be. It should be fun. The Rock obviously doesn't seem to mind doing these mindless action movies. Yeah. So
it's a staple.
Yeah, as long as they're having fun and it's an enjoyable movie, who cares? As long as it's fun and everyone has a good time as they walk out. And then in the last bit of news, Wonder Woman and Warner Brothers have blinked against the all-powerful Star Wars, which is a smart move.
Star Wars.
Wonder Woman 2 has moved up about 6 weeks to avoid a conflict with Star Wars, because when they originally slated Wonder Woman 2, they put it in December of 2019 because Star Wars Episode 9 was supposed to be coming out May 2019. And then because of the director change, Disney and Star Wars and Lucasfilms all decided that week before Christmas is a pretty sweet spot.
Yep.
So we're gonna take that.
It's a good Christmas present for me.
Exactly. Wonder Woman was already slated there, and Disney just kind of gave a big middle finger to Warner Brothers and said, "Nah, that's our spot now."
Yeah, they can, so they will.
Warner Brothers kind of looked over the calendar and said, "This looks like a good spot," and they've now moved to November 1st, 2019. If Thor Ragnarok is any indication, it's a pretty good weekend to open up.
I won't complain.
That also means all the advanced screenings that we do will be on Halloween night.
Well, I don't really do anything that night anyways.
Well, you'll be doing something on 2019, watching Wonder Woman. So it's a smart move. I'm honestly slightly surprised that they moved up 6 weeks, but at the same time, I'm not, because that sounds like something DC would do. They don't want to fall into that February, January time frame, just because Star Wars will probably still be going pretty strong at that point. And so you want to
can only hope.
Yeah, they have 6 weeks to make as much money as possible until Star Wars comes out. And I don't think Marvel has anything slated for that time frame yet. Well, 2019 is pretty jam-packed already. You've got Captain Marvel in March, you've got Avengers 4 in May, and then you've got Spider-Man Homecoming 2 in July. So I don't think Marvel wants to oversaturate with 4 movies in a year.
Yeah, that's probably true.
But, I mean, we're getting 3 Marvel movies in the span of 4 months, which is pretty awesome.
Yes. I mean, that definitely is.
March, April, May, June, July. 5 months, technically, unless you count from the time Captain Marvel comes out. So then it would be April, May, June, July, which would be 4. So semantics. But yeah, 2019 seems like it's going to be a pretty fun year. And speaking of Wonder Woman, we're going to get to our main topic here already. And that is the Justice League movie. For those of you who have not seen the movie yet, we are doing full spoilers. We're not doing non-spoilers this time. largely because the movie is so short and they cut everything down so intricately that you cannot talk about this movie without talking about spoilers. If you have not seen this movie and you don't want to be spoiled, thanks for listening. Find us on Facebook, find us on Twitter, find us on YouTube. We're at Talking Smack Pod at Talking Smack Pod on Twitter. We're at TSmackPod on Gmail. Send us your thoughts.
Please do.
Yeah, we appreciate any and all feedback. We appreciate any and all questions, comments, concerns. I don't know why you have concerns other than the fact that maybe we're just a bit crazy for doing this podcast.
We're always crazy, Josh.
Clearly. So yeah, thanks for listening. We'll see you next week, hopefully. We're either going to be doing Battlefront 2 or Coco review. Very different things in that one, too.
Maybe both.
Maybe
Who
both.
knows?
Probably not. I don't have that kind of time. Anyway, Justice League trailer. Full spoilers. First thing we're going to talk about is it made $13 million on Thursday night openings, which is the fourth highest DCEU, DC movie universe, whatever you want to call it, opening, which for the Justice League, that's pretty bad.
That's kind of what I thought too when I saw those numbers, especially compared to Batman versus Superman,
which opened at $27.7 million for Thursday screenings.
Yeah.
And that's crazy considering the movie, that Batman v Superman, was like 45 minutes longer than Justice League. So that means they had fewer showings of that on Thursday night. Yeah. Whereas Justice League at a 2 hour, like it's literally less than 2 hours if you don't include the credits. It's mind-boggling that this movie did not open to a bigger screening. I'm not saying that it deserves a bigger amount of money, but just for reference, Wonder Woman opened at $11 million.
Right.
But it went on to have a huge weekend because word of mouth was spread in it because of how good it was. Unfortunately, that's not the case with Justice League, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think it just was tarnished a bit by Batman versus Superman. I mean, I think Wonder Woman, if it wasn't for Wonder Woman, I think it would have done even worse. Pretty much.
If Wonder Woman failed, this probably might have not even made $13 million. It might have not even hit double digits in the millions.
Yeah.
It might have made 9, maybe 10 million.
Like overall, it is a decent just action movie, but I mean, it was a little disappointing to say the least. And
there's so much to talk about. I want to talk about some good stuff first, just because I feel like I'm going to be talking about a lot of negatives. Superman in this movie is done pretty well. I don't think it's perfect, but it's probably the best Superman we have seen in this movie universe.
Not graphically wise.
Not visually, no. Because, the mustache thing, if you don't know about it, just Google it. Henry Cavill mustache and Justice League should find you all the stories. It's too complicated to talk about, and it's too weird to talk about. Basically,
I thought he had a stroke.
Yeah, is just very weird. And for a movie that has a $300 million budget, they did not put a lot into their visual effects. I'm supposed to be talking about good stuff right now, Derek.
It's my bad. My bad.
We don't get a really good Batman sequence like we did in Batman v Superman, which kind of was disappointing. The very first time we see Batman is kind of cool, where he's stalking some cat burglar. But even that sequence is kind of boring outside of the visual of him squatting on the gargoyle across the street. The Diana sequence is interesting, but the time frame is really weird because she only has 20 seconds to do something. By the time she actually starts doing that something, it's been like 4 seconds, so she has 13 seconds to do that thing.
Yeah.
And it's if they had given her 30 or 45 seconds, okay.
It's never good to actually count down that stuff because it never makes sense in the end, honestly.
No, but I mean, I get they're trying to show how fast she moves, especially in the sequence where she's doing her... We're talking about negatives right now. No, we need to talk about positives. So Wonder Woman has her moment, but it's in a weird time constraint thing that I'll get into later when we're talking more negatives. But there are positives. Like Ezra Miller, as much as I still really don't like him as the Flash, he was better than I was expecting. Mainly because of his eyes. There are a few sequences where his eyes are so expressive,
right?
It works, and it's awesome. Like when Superman comes back, he's literally watching the Flash move at his Flash speed. And it freaks him out, and all you see are his eyes.
Yeah, he's
and
like,
his eyes are just bugging out. I was like, holy shit, he's watching me. He can see me moving.
Yeah. He's probably the part that I enjoyed most about the movie.
Yeah, I agree.
In terms of lightheartedness.
he definitely shone the brightest in this movie.
Which is really, like, surprising, honestly.
Yeah, I thought it was going to be a very big Flash showcase, but I didn't think I would like Ezra Miller as much as I did. And I thought Aquaman was going to kind of steal the show, because I think DC is really trying to get rid of the Super Friends thing, where he's like riding on dolphins, and you know, then the whole persona of Aquaman talks to fish.
Nothing too ridiculous.
Yeah, Aquaman was fine. The Amazonians showed up. They looked very 300. They didn't look quite as good as they did in Wonder Woman, in my opinion. It was really weird costuming, where they apparently evolved from the 1920s and World War I era Wonder Woman movie with like full-on armor to having bikini tops. Regarding the most important thing in Themyscira and possibly in the world, we're going to make sure that our women have fewer layers of armor.
I think they're still
They had some killer abs, but in a fight that means nothing.
They're still living in their own time, though, even though so much time has actually passed. I mean, they're still living in their own time, using wooden arrows and bows and ropes and stuff.
Magic ropes,
excuse me.
There are good things in this movie, but the negatives really outweigh them.
They do, unfortunately.
The Batcave is kind of cool. When when the Flash shows up in the Batcave for the first time is really funny, because he's literally just dashing everywhere, just checking it all out.
Yep, like a kid in a candy shop.
Yeah, and he's just like, "Oh my God, you work in a cave," and he runs around and you can tell this is a Joss Whedon moment though. And he's like, "It's like a Batcave." And it has some good laughs, but not in a way that kind of feels out of place. Like you can tell, like, oh, Joss Whedon wanted a moment here. Oh, Joss Whedon wanted a moment here. And to be fair, if I didn't know that there were two directors on this movie, I wouldn't have thought that there were two directors. Like visually, it is fairly consistent outside of the really bad green screen reshoots.
Right.
Those are really bad. We're going to use that as our segue into the bad stuff. Because unfortunately there's a lot of bad stuff to talk about in this movie, and I feel like it really detracts from the enjoyment that should have been had the first time we saw this movie.
Or like maybe not so much just bad stuff, but more like disappointments.
Yes, that's a better term.
Because we had a lot of hopes.
I went in with
I
went in with low expectations, but hoping for the best. Right. And I kind of felt somewhere more towards the best, but at the same time, not really. Like I felt more in the middle.
Yeah, better than Batman versus Superman.
Better than Suicide Squad.
Not as good as like Wonder Woman.
I think it was better than Man of Steel as well, but it was not better than Wonder Woman. And but that's also, that's like Usain Bolt beating me in a race. Right. There's a pretty big gap there.
Yep.
So one of the first things I want to talk about is, very early on in the movie, we are introduced to this family in Russia after the parademons show up, and
they're basically
they serve no purpose.
Yeah, and they're in like Chernobyl, basically.
Yeah, it's essentially Chernobyl. Just not. Yep. I don't think they ever actually named the city. They just said, "Oh,
they do just some random."
Yeah, it's some random Russian town.
Name, yeah.
But yeah, basically it's a town that their nuclear plant had a meltdown, yep. And like 30 years later they're slowly starting to rebuild, and they try to like raise the stakes for people because Aquaman like shows sympathy, like they're just people trying to get by. We see that they're a poor family, but they only show this one family, and
it just seemed strange because like it's supposed to be like a community of people like living in the outskirts of this like town, just because they have no other place to go. They're out in the middle of nowhere in Russia, but they just kept focusing on just the one family, but there really wasn't much dialogue at all.
There was no dialogue. It was all visuals, because I'm sure, well, there was some dialogue, but it was all like, stay down, get down,
right?
Because the parademons are coming, and even they don't know what the parademons are. They just see giant cockroaches or something flying around, and the dad just says, stay down, get down, be quiet. Like, that's it. And it's all in subtitles. I guess they could only afford so many subtitles.
And it's like they were trying to get us to have like some sort of emotional investment in these people, but it just wasn't there.
But the way the movie presented it felt like they were the only people in that town. We didn't see any neighbors. We didn't hear any other commotion.
Not until like closer to the end of the whole action like sequence.
And in the end, it didn't matter because, again, we're supposed to, it's a cheating mechanism to try and make you care about the stakes, because this family that has 2 little kids and no dog. So like
Right.
the manipulation's not really there because you got to have the dog. Like they're not able to escape the giant crystals that are forming, or giant
Right, like the
roots, or
terraforming that's
whatever the
occurring.
terraforming is going on. They're not able to run out because their car overheated because they're so poor.
Yep.
And then the Flash comes and saves the day because he and Superman are gonna. Spoiler alert: Superman comes back. I already said
Yep.
full spoilers going in.
Well, I mean, I think just based on the trailers, like almost anyone who knew anything about the movies knows that he comes back anyways.
Yeah, and I mean, anyone who saw Batman v Superman saw the dirt, which that's a really weird payoff for that. That's something I'm going to get into as well. But the family in Russia just was absolutely pointless. That whole subplot could have been cut out. They could have left in the fact that the Flash saves them from their burnt out car in the movie, and it wouldn't have changed anything.
Nope.
And it also goes into I mean, the whole sequence they're in, I think they maybe have like 2 minutes of screen time, but whatever, that's stuff that doesn't matter to the actual story. And speaking of stuff that doesn't matter, there's like a 3 or 4 minute opening credit sequence, which I guess is supposed to show how hopeless the world has become since Superman's dead. There's police brutality. There's a homeless person on the street that has a sign that says "I tried."
That just didn't make any sense to me.
The only thing I can think
At
of is
all.
he's given up hope for trying to do something. We don't know what that thing
Like
is.
I thought maybe it was some sort of like callback to something that had occurred in Batman versus Superman.
No.
Like just some homeless person in the background maybe that had a sign.
I think it was
the
just
same person again. Nope.
It was just supposed to present like how hopeless the world has become without Superman. This opening credit sequence could have been cut, and it would not have changed anything within the movie because we don't see much of the world outside of that opening credits, and it doesn't impact anything.
No.
And there's also an opening sequence with really bad CGI Henry Cavill
Oh my
on a
God.
kid's phone. He's like, I'm going to record you for my podcast.
It's the first thing you see in the movie. The
And
first
it's
thing.
really creepy CGI Henry
Yeah.
Cavill.
Super
And
creepy. He looks like he had a stroke.
There's one line in that moment too where he's being interviewed by these kids, and the kids are like, "So why do you have the S on your shirt?" Well, it means hope, which we've already covered in Man of
Yeah.
Steel. And then, well, it looks like an S. He's like, "It's supposed to." No, it's not. It's not supposed to look like an S. That is your alien symbol for hope.
Right.
It is just a complete coincidence that it also looks like an S.
Exactly. And
It's not supposed to do anything.
That whole scene seemed pointless to
It was
too.
put in to have a smiling Superman. It reeked of desperation. They're like, look, he's smiling. Look, people like him. Because in Batman v Superman and Man of Steel, we don't know how the world actually feels about Superman,
Right.
other than the U.S. Congresswoman who wants to outlaw Superman or monetize him or weaponize him or whatever, put him in the Sokovia Accords.
Mm-hmm.
Essentially, we don't really know how the world feels about Superman. So that's what that opening sequence was supposed to be. It was supposed to say, look, the world likes him. Kids love him. People want to be him. And now the world mourns him because he's dead. Which, again, it just reeked of desperation to me that's what they were trying to go for. That whole sequence could have been cut between the kids interviewing Superman and the opening credits, and they could have just opened with Batman catching the cat burglar.
It just
and it would
felt
have
like
been
the
fine.
movie hadn't actually even started yet.
Yeah, it was an epilogue that didn't need to happen, or a prologue. I get those confused sometimes. It was a prologue that didn't need to happen, and the opening credits is clearly a Zack Snyder thing, because we had a similar thing in Batman v Superman with Bruce Wayne's parents getting murdered, and both of them look like a video game sequence. Like it doesn't belong in a movie. It looks way
Right.
too CGI'd, and it just looks bad. Moving on from just the opening 5 minutes of the movie, there's a scene in Atlantis which is really dark, so you don't really get the full grasp of this. You don't get the grasp of Atlantis.
Right.
It's an underwater kingdom, and all we see is a small portion of it where they're guarding a mother box. It's really weird to me because, one, these are people who are native to living underwater. They are mer people,
Right.
And they move like surface dwellers who move underwater, and it looks really weird
Even
and clunky.
faster, really.
Yeah, but it still looks really weird and clunky. And Mara, who is supposed to be this great water wizard, magician, whatever you want to call her, sorceress, she She just moves really weird, and the sequence where she and Aquaman have a conversation is really weird because she creates like an air pocket for them to just kind of have a chill and have a conversation.
Right.
Like, you're mer people. You can talk underwater. Why do you need an air pocket?
I don't really understand why they did that. I mean, there was a fight sequence where she was doing it to try and stop Steppenwolf, but
and that looks fine. The movements look really weird.
Throwing him in the water, throwing him out of the water.
Steppenwolf moved better in the water than the Atlanteans did.
He did seem somewhat like unaffected compared to, I guess.
And he didn't have to worry about breathing for some reason. Like, apparently he has Superman's lung capacity.
Yeah, we don't even know what he is exactly.
He's an apocalyptic, but who's been outcast by Darkseid for reasons. Because he didn't conquer Earth. Because last time when he came to conquer Earth, he decided to gloat and make people kneel before terraforming it with the mother boxes. And so now this time he's here to collect the mother boxes and terraform Earth for Apocalypse, and then he'll be allowed back in. But again, that's like backstory that's completely inferred through exposition. If you're not listening for it or you're not paying attention, you completely miss it. Like, his motivations are very ill-defined.
Pretty much, besides just wanting to terraform Earth, that's all I really got from it.
Yeah,
really.
They reveal that he's gonna just get the mother boxes and go in the scene where Wonder Woman and Batman, or Diana and Bruce Wayne, are walking along the lake.
Right, and I specifically heard Steppenwolf mention Darkseid, but beyond that, I didn't know or understand the connection, besides Darkseid obviously being like a master of some sorts.
Well, that's one thing that Joss Whedon changed, is apparently there was supposed to be a cliffhanger ending alluding to Darkseid, even more heavy-handed, but Joss Whedon took that out, I think largely because it was way too similar to what happened with Thanos in the original Avengers. And
understandable, I guess.
Through the post-credit scenes, it looks like they're completely going away from Darkseid for a while, because they tease the Injustice League or the Legion of Doom or the Light, whatever you want to call it. So that's something we'll get into in a little bit. Joss Whedon also reworked Cyborg scenes to try and give him a slightly different tone. Because if you watch the trailers leading up to this, like all 19 of them that they released, there's a lot of backstory for Victor Stone that was left out, and there was a lot of clearly brooding moments that he also did not get.
Right.
But speaking of Cyborg, there's a scene in the movie that did not fit. It weirded me out. It was when they go to rescue the hostages that Steppenwolf has taken, the like 9 people who are missing, and he like goes and tackles his dad, which is a weird thing to do when you're trying to rescue someone. Like, you just tackle him, and then you wait a second, and you're like, "Hey, Dad," and he's like, "Victor, you found me." They're having a family moment. Let's just leave him alone for a few seconds.
It's like, wait, wasn't Steppenwolf like just standing right there?
Yeah, wouldn't he just like take Cyborg and like be like, "What the fuck are you? What are you doing here?" And that scene was weird, and they got rid of a lot of backstory. I think they're going to fill a lot of that in and use a lot of the footage that they shot in Justice League for the Cyborg movie whenever that comes out. But I think, I forget, Ray Fisher, I think, is the guy who plays Cyborg.
I think never heard of him or seen him.
I'm pretty sure it's Ray Fisher. He was fine. I would have liked a more enthusiastic booyah out of him.
Right. Okay. See, that's the thing for me, is that the Cyborg that I know like most is from Teen Titans. I mean, that's the Cyborg that I grew up on, you could say. So I mean, it was different seeing him be like much more dark and brooding compared to that more enthusiastic and energetic Cyborg. It's not that I didn't enjoy it. I found it more interesting. I mean, it was okay.
I don't get Cyborg being in the Justice League. He's always going to be a Teen Titan or a member of the team if you're going by Young Justice standards. I don't get why he's so integral to be in the Justice League right now. I know in the New 52 he was in there. I don't think he's been a part of the Teen Titans since the New 52, or he was ever a part of the Teen Titans. I don't know.
If it wasn't for the fact that he was like pretty useful as a character in terms of like some of the action sequences where he helped with the Nightcrawler, getting that back up so they could escape from the collapsing tunnel, and then the fact that he's
the key to separating the 3 mother boxes,
right?
Which I think was the whole point of doing that. But speaking of Cyborg, while we're on the subject, there was clearly some kind of subplot where he like succumbs, or the machine within takes over.
Right.
And they never do anything with that. They have like a brief moment where he talks in a robotic voice for a second, and then he's like, excuse me, I'm better now.
Right.
They're in Chernobyl. Like,
or like when they first bring Superman like back to life, and then his body's defense systems kick in, and he
for
can't
no real
control
reason.
it. Yeah,
like
for no real reason.
He knows that that Superman is scanning them, like trying to figure out like what's going on with them. Are they real? What's happening? And then his armor just decides we should attack.
Yep, that's a threat. Yep, I need to shoot it now.
Which,
like that didn't. I don't know. It was just weird. Like they first brought him in, and like he was scared and he wasn't sure because he knew he didn't have like full control yet, and then it just stopped being an issue once he needed to separate the mother boxes.
Yeah, and it didn't make sense. Speaking of,
it probably has to deal with the stuff that they cut out too.
Oh yeah,
like all
they
the fluff
probably
that would have made it better. Maybe.
I think it just would have been. It would, like you said, it would have been fluff that didn't matter. But I think maybe leaving in the subplot of the mother box or whatever the programming is within him,
right,
taking over for a moment.
Like,
I think that should have been left in.
I guess by better, I just mean like better explanation for things.
Yeah,
like
and
story wise,
we might get that in an extended cut that will probably come out. I mean, so far every DC movie besides Man of Steel and Wonder Woman has had an extended cut. We don't know. We'll see. While we're on the subject of Cyborg and Superman, there's a scene very late in the movie where Cyborg is separating the three mother boxes. He creates like some kind of delay where he and Superman can separate them, and Superman's like, and he's like, Cyborg says there will be a kickback. He's like, is it gonna hurt? And he's like, yeah. And then they get blown up, and Superman, who has just recently been resurrected, is like, oh man, I wish I was dead.
Yeah, and the explosion that, like, they were like, oh my god, it's going to be such a big explosion. It's going to hurt. It's going to take...
It knocks them back like 7 or 8 feet.
Yeah, and it only knocks them back 7, and it's like, that was it. That was the huge explosion that they were all worried about.
Like you said, they made a big deal out of it when they were on the bat plane or whatever. They were talking about how separating the boxes could have a pretty big explosion. Like, they should all be clear.
Like, big explosion. And right
Victor
now
could handle it.
They're in the big, like, steam or smokestack for the nuclear plant.
It only affects that, like, 9-foot radius.
Yeah, like, it's like, okay, that didn't collapse or anything. I mean, they even took that down in one of, like, the Wolverine movies from Cyclops Beam or whatever.
Yeah, and I don't, that line with Superman just didn't sit well with me because it was supposed to be played up for a laugh because he and Cyborg both start laughing.
Yeah, but it felt very forced.
Yeah, it wasn't funny, and among other things, maybe it like had an internal effect on them, and Cyborg was like, I can feel my toes.
Yeah, and for how long that scene was too, it's like, you guys, Steppenwolf is still alive. You haven't taken care of him yet. Where the hell is he? What is he doing?
Yeah, and again, just like the scene where they rescue Cyborg's dad, Steppenwolf's just kind of letting him chill out and make a few quips.
Yeah,
whatever.
It's like, does Steppenwolf suck that bad? Is that why he was kicked out by Darkseid?
Another Superman line that really bothered me was when they resurrected Superman, just to kind of leave some things unspoiled. We're not going to talk about how Superman comes back. We're just going to say he's resurrected. When he comes back, and he's very defensive because he doesn't know what's happening.
Right.
And
I guess is understandable.
And this is another thing. Before I'm going to go off topic here really quickly. In Batman v Superman, they essentially kiss and make up in that movie. Mm-hmm. And Diana's like, if you're the first person he sees when he wakes up, you probably won't survive. And Batman's like, I'll accept it because Superman needs to live, and I don't matter.
I'll deal with it. I'm a hard ass, like I always am.
That's not how I took it. I think it was more he's old and he's too tired to continue to do this, and the world needs Superman more than it needs Batman. And so that's kind of what he was thinking. But it doesn't translate within this universe because they made up. Like, they were fighting side by side at the end of Batman v Superman. They our moms have the same name. We should be friends. Batman goes, I'm going to go rescue your mom. And
they made it seem like it was Batman who actually killed Superman, but it was...
Yeah, and I mean, yes, technically Batman was trying to kill Superman, but again, they kiss and make up, and then they fight Doomsday. And then
Doomsday is the one who killed Superman.
And Superman sacrificed himself, but they're playing it up like if Superman wakes up and sees Batman, he's going to be pissed. Why?
It didn't make much sense.
And
I understand if when he woke up to be confused and not know what's going on when you die and then come back to life, that's understandable. But to then just get pissed off and want to kill everyone, that didn't make much sense. And especially for them to make it seem like he would especially want to kill Batman.
Yeah, it just that didn't play well with me. Although I will say when they brought him back, I was happy with the way they did it because he wasn't technically evil. And that was a big thing a lot of people were concerned, or not concerned, but thinking that was going to happen is that Steppenwolf was going to use a mother box to bring him back and he would be evil and manipulated.
Yeah, he wasn't evil or a villain. He just was
He didn't
confused.
have his... he wasn't fully aware of what was happening. He had literally just woken up from a very long sleep.
Yep.
And but going back to it, when he sees Batman for the first time, he has him by the face while he's hovering, and he just asks him, "Do you bleed?" Which was the Mary Poppins y'all of 2016 for me, which the internet just killed that line. It was a bad line to begin with, and it just... calling back to it was just... I think that was just Zack Snyder, giving himself, a pat on the back, I made the internet happy. Of course he bleeds. He's human. Asking that question is completely stupid, except for the fact that it's a callback to a line that fanboys loved when the first trailer came out.
I didn't care for it.
It was completely So another thing in that same scene is apparently secret identities mean shit. Because
throughout the whole movie, pretty much.
Yeah, Aquaman outs Bruce Wayne as Batman in Norway.
I think the only person that really even has a secret identity is the Flash.
Yeah,
pretty much. He's the only one that is wearing a mask for most of the whole time,
and he doesn't have any interactions. And I mean, people call him Barry, but no one knows who the hell Barry is.
No.
And then Aquaman is fairly... No one in America apparently knows who he would be. But, the Norwegians and the Dutch people where he kind of tends to hang out would seem to know who he is.
Right.
But when Superman comes back, they have a secret card to play, which everyone is meant to assume that it's kryptonite. They're going to put him down with the kryptonite spear from Batman v Superman, or they have some backup kryptonite somewhere. And it ends up being Lois.
Which wasn't surprising whatsoever.
No. And... throughout the entire portion of this leading up to Lois, Diana, Wonder Woman, calls him Kal-El.
Right.
Or the first time she calls him Kal-El, which, she's foreign. She's allowed to mispronounce a few words. But she calls him Kal-El later. They're calling him Kal-El or Superman. Then Lois shows up, and she goes, Clark.
Yep.
Clark.
Yeah.
Clark. And there's a cop with an earshot.
Yeah.
And... Why would that cop not just go, why is she calling Superman Clark? That doesn't matter though. And then I think they call Batman Bruce a couple of times, but again, literally Aquaman outs Bruce Wayne as Batman in front of a giant crowd of people when he's walking into the water. Apparently secret identities don't mean shit, or the civilians just know how important these people are to keep the crazies at bay, and they just let them kind of keep going on living in their delusion. The biggest compliment I can give to this movie is I was very intrigued by the boom tube effect. It looked very similar to the Rainbow Bridge effect of Thor.
That's what it reminded me most of too.
I mean, it's an interesting interpretation of the boom tube because pretty much every time we've seen it in comics or in animation, it's literally just a big white light circle that shows up, which we've also seen in Doctor Strange.
Sort of portal, yeah.
Yeah. So the fact that it's like this pulsating tube,
a vacuum tube.
Yeah, it's called a boom tube
for space.
It's called a boom tube, so you would think, it would be a tube instead of a portal.
Right.
So I kind of like that, and it was an interesting effect. But the first time Steppenwolf shows up in a boom tube, one, it was very similar to how Loki shows up in Avengers. And two, when he first starts speaking, I was like, is that Arnold Schwarzenegger? Did they get him to do the voice acting for this? Because he shows up, he's like, Amazonians, how you doing? I'm here to take your mother box. And then he just kind of slowly takes away the accent, and he just sounds like a normal guy. But Steppenwolf was a very generic-looking villain, but the animation in some spots was really good. I was like, wow, they did really good with that. And then immediately with, like, they would cut away and then come back, and then he would look like a video game villain.
It was very just, like, back and forth in terms of, like, how stuff looked. From scene to scene, it just kind of broke things up.
Yeah, it was very distracting because, again, sometimes he looked really good, like, oh, wow, they did a really good motion capture for this one. And then they would cut back and you'd just be like, did I start playing a video game version of Justice League? And where his lips wouldn't move right and his jaw and everything just didn't sync up.
And it's still, all of that though, it still did look better than that first scene with the CGI Superman. That was probably, we're complaining about like some of the visuals from the movie, but none of it was as bad as that very first scene. I have to say,
the first scene is pretty bad, but the scene in the cornfield is pretty bad too, where they do
like with
they do like a wide shot,
Clark?
and then they do they do like face-to-face shots, and there's a couple shots, one circulating on the internet right now that I sent you from that scene, and it looks so bad. His teeth look fake, his lips don't move right, his cheeks and everything. From my understanding, they took a facial scan of him from like Man of Steel, and then they did a facial scan of him for Justice League with the mustache, and then they layered the Man of Steel scan on top of it. So it's literally like he's wearing a mask of himself.
And it, like, you can tell too, like around his mouth, that it's like, is he okay? Did he have a stroke? Does he have some sort of like tumor growing? Like what is going on there? Nerve damage?
Yeah. So the biggest non-technical flaw of this movie is the stakes never feel very high. Like, this is a world-ending event that is happening, and you never feel it. It's such a breakneck pace that they don't take a moment to really emphasize how big of a deal this is.
And like they really built up to it too. That's the disappointing part, is like they really built up on how like bad Steppenwolf was, and like he's going to do what he's going to do. Like he gets each of the boxes, like he just pretty much just swats away the Amazons and takes the box, and then he goes in and just
swats
kicks
away
ass
the Atlanteans.
And then he
steals the mother box from the humans that Victor had stolen after the Superman fight. He just kind of shows up and is like, oh, hey, cool, thanks.
Oh, you guys just left this laying here. Oh, thanks, how convenient.
But yeah, the stakes never feels like it's a world-ending event. You know that the Justice League is going to win.
And then you get to the very end of like the main like action sequence of them like trying to take him down, and it just didn't feel tense.
Yeah, Superman showed up, and they were all having a good time at that point. Like, oh, hey, Soupy's here. We can just kind of hang out. Where
he like Steppenwolf pretty much kind of like kicked their ass for the first part of the movie, like when he actually fought them, and then the other characters like the Atlanteans and the Amazons. But then like near the very end, and then as soon as Superman showed up, it was just like a cakewalk for them, I guess. It just seemed too easy.
Yeah. And that's kind of the conundrum of Superman, is the same thing with Professor X in most of the X-Men movies, is he's so powerful, you have to find a way to make things feel like they're not going to be able to solve this problem.
Superman had a much tougher time against Zod.
True.
In Man of Steel versus Steppenwolf.
But Zod is essentially Superman. They're on the same par and same level, where Zod is a military trained, born and bred to be a military man person, or Kryptonian, where Steppenwolf is an apocalyptic, part of the new gods, or
you would think though that he would be like almost as powerful, not just as powerful, but almost as powerful, and he's been around for thousands of years.
Yeah,
and then he just gets his ass handed to him.
He got a few punches in on Superman,
just
but
a couple minutes.
Yeah, and it didn't matter. Let's talk about how they Batman gets the Black Widow treatment in the final sequence. Like, he doesn't get his Batman moment really in this movie. But he basically is relegated to Black Widow in this movie at the end, where he's just firing a gun at nothing really in particular off screen. They just show him, like, he has his gun and he's firing.
Yeah, like, he really can't do much.
Yeah, so he runs around. Like, the entire sequence of the Batmobile we have seen in the trailers. And that's kind of, I was happy with that, honestly, because like, oh yeah, they gave Batman something to do, and then the Batmobile is destroyed, and
once his toys were gone, it's just like, okay.
So yeah, he just kind of
punch people and swing around and stuff.
Yeah, he just kind of hangs out on a ledge and just shoots an alien gun for 5 minutes while the Flash runs around and hurts people, and Wonder Woman kind of distracts Steppenwolf for a little while, and then Cyborg is doing the other, trying to separate the mother boxes, and Aquaman is kind of, he's helping out. He's tag teaming with Wonder Woman against Steppenwolf, and then Superman shows up, saves the day, and then once they separate the mother boxes, a boom tube shows up, and they don't actually like kill Steppenwolf, but because they've separated the mother boxes and Superman's there, Steppenwolf apparently has now become scared or fearful of at least Superman, and the parademons are attracted to fear, so they will attack whatever is giving off that fear pheromone or whatever, and that's all well and good as a way to get rid of the villain, but there were millions of parademons. There were hundreds of thousands of parademons, and not all of them made it into that boom tube.
It seemed somewhat lackluster.
Yeah, it was just it was a clean and cut. It was a way to not do the Avengers ending or the Phantom Menace ending, where the bad guys just all fall over dead because the mothership was destroyed. Because obviously there's no mothership, but there's hundreds of thousands of parademons that are like loose in the world.
Yep.
Whatever. It's fine. Like, getting rid the way they got rid of Steppenwolf was fine. It tied up the bow. It didn't. The entire movie doesn't leave much to really be enjoyed, as far as I'm concerned. But there's the way they defeated,
for what it could have been.
Exactly. But the way they defeated Steppenwolf, and again, the stakes just never feel big. It doesn't feel like, oh my gosh, the world is going to end.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, to be fair, the Avengers doesn't really do that either.
No.
But it's entertaining, at least. And everyone has like a moment, and there's a team moment.
I feel like the DCEU
movie universe,
like, I feel like they have had like a much darker tone to things versus the Marvel movies. So I mean, I feel like it should be kind of expected, just at least a little bit, that they would have that bit more of a higher stakes kind of feeling.
Yeah, and I mean, part of what DC does really well, though, is that their characters do a lot in space. So there's not a lot of earthbound material that they can really cover, especially with characters like Superman. And I mean, the Flash has a lot of his own, but they don't have Justice League level villains. And one of the last couple things I do want to talk about before we get into like where's the DC universe going is one, they try really hard to make Wonder Woman the leader of this movie, and it never really ends up. It's another storyline that just doesn't really go anywhere. Like all it's leading up to is Batman again goes to sacrifice himself in the final scene, and then apparently Wonder Woman makes a judgment call and says, we're going to help Batman. We're not just going to go stop Steppenwolf. We're going to go help Batman and stop him from going on a suicide mission.
Right.
And they have a quick moment of like, oh, the lady made the call, didn't ask for an opinion from anyone else. And but they try to make it really apparent that, like, because she is Diana, Princess of Themyscira, she can be a beacon that Superman has kind of left vacant or void,
right?
That beacon of hope. And she has gone into hiding because she's so depressed about Steve Trevor.
Which just, to me, like, the whole movie gave me a different impression of Wonder Woman versus the actual standalone Wonder Woman movie. With the way it ended, it seemed like she was going to be like that beacon of hope.
Yeah, and it's just another payoff that doesn't happen. They build up towards something, and apparently that one thing was, we're going to team up and fight these parademons before we go fight Steppenwolf. So I don't know what that was all about. And then the other thing is there is a tease for the Hall of Justice at the end of the movie, but it's Bruce and Diana like doing some window shopping.
It took me a second though to like even realize what was happening, because it just seemed
they're just in this dilapidated mansion,
but it still seemed small to me. I guess that's why I didn't realize what it was at first, because I guess I'm just used to all like the cartoon versions of the Hall of Justice where it's huge.
Yeah, it's a museum. Like they literally have a museum,
like
built
a
out
mausoleum almost, basically. And then they're just in this smallish mansion with a large dining room.
Yeah,
and like, oh, we're gonna put a big round table there
with room for more.
With 6 seats, and then Diana goes like with room for more.
Which that whole scene is fine. I like the allusion to the Hall of Justice. I mean, I would have preferred something along the lines of like the Watchtower, because you now know that there's an intergalactic threat out there. Maybe you should get the Watchtower.
Yeah, that would make more sense, like in this day and age, versus just the Hall of Justice. I mean, it's understandable to have the Hall of Justice, but you would think that having like a space fortress would be your first choice.
Yeah, and it would make it different enough from the Avengers, who have, Avengers Tower. But the other thing in that scene that bothered me is the fact that Superman is not there. They are talking, this entire movie is about how the Justice League needs to exist because Superman is dead, and only Superman can inspire the hope that is in this world.
Yeah, it just seemed weird that it was mainly just Bruce and Diana making
and Alfred was there to have a joke.
Decisions.
Yeah, and like why would you not invite Superman?
To me, I would think there should be more than just those 3.
Well, I mean, they're the Trinity. They're like the 3 heads of the Justice League. Like they're supposed to be the ones that really make the decisions, although they do offer out a democratic policy within the Justice League, but they're the 3 that are like the big hitters of the Justice League. So as long as those, like, we needed more scenes with those 3, but I feel like that scene was added in after Joss Whedon came in, and they couldn't get Henry Cavill in there because of the mustache. Like, that's the only thing I can think of, is they just didn't want to have to CGI out the mustache in that scene as well.
Which, I mean, I guess just based on that fact, I can appreciate, because of how horrible it looked in the first opening.
Gave you nightmares, didn't it?
It just bothered me. It just looked wrong.
So we've rambled inconsistently throughout the different things going on with this movie. We're going to end with the post-credits scenes talking in this review, and then we'll give our opinions on whether or not you should see it or maybe go spend your money elsewhere. There are 2 post-credit scenes. There's one after I don't even know if there's like an actual like credits where they have like an effect and like what Marvel does, but they have one after the first batch of credits, which is just the Flash and Superman prepping to have a race, and they bring back a joke where the Flash doesn't understand east and west. He doesn't know what direction it is.
Right, which, I mean, I can't really point fingers, so...
Which is fine, and everyone wants to know, because, and it's a nice callback to how Superman is able to watch him when he's in the Speed Force moving as fast as he does.
Well, I even remember their characters having a race back in the Justice League cartoon shows.
That was the Superman animated series. I actually just watched that episode.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and it's fun and it's a great thing, but there's no payoff to it. It's literally just them going on your mark, get set, go.
Yeah.
And then, but I mean, that's the whole point of like hero versus hero, is you don't ever get a real answer to the question. Because, I mean, again, going back to Avengers, you have Iron Man versus Thor, and there's no real winner there because Cap intervenes. And then you have Hulk versus Thor, but if Thor can take on Hulk, why can't he just destroy Iron Man in his regular armor?
Yep.
So it's one of those things that just, you'll never get a real answer, because it's fun to have these kind of debates. And then the actual post-credits scene, which I think is pretty clearly directed by Zack Snyder, shows Lex Luthor, having escaped prison, is on a yacht somehow. I don't know how he still has access to his money or his assets. And Deathstroke shows up, and Lex Luthor's like, shouldn't we have a league of our own? And it's alluding to the Injustice League or Legion of Doom.
Which obviously like shows like for the next major movie, that's who they're kind of lead to be as like the main antagonist.
Yeah, they're going away from Darkseid. It's a pretty clear and intentional left turn from having this intergalactic threat of Darkseid coming in and moving them towards something more local. And just they're probably trying to. I think they're partially trying to do it because they want to right ship with how bad Jesse Eisenberg's Lex Luthor was received. Mm-hmm. So they're going to try and make him more of like the Lex Luthor that people are expecting. So that's Justice League in a really scattered nutshell.
Yep.
Lots of problems. It does have some nice moments. It's definitely not as dark as other DC movies have been. It's, as far as tone, it's more in the vein of Wonder Woman. Very short, very, very brisk pace.
Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't say it's very short, but it was very brisk.
Yeah,
in terms of how it was
personally,
paced.
I would say it's short because by the time the credits started rolling, you pulled out your phone and you looked at the time and it was like, oh my god, it's only 8:25 right now, it was 8:12. Mm-hmm. You said the movie started at like 6:23.
Yep.
So it's literally an hour and 50 minutes from the opening sequence to the end credits rolling, and that was just crazy to me, especially for a Justice League movie. So in this podcast, in this show, we're only going to have 2 ratings. It's not going to be on a scale of 1 to 5. It's going to be must see for movies and a hard pass for pretty much anything. Like, should you spend your money on this? Should you devote time to this? And because I cannot definitively say this is a must see movie, I have to go with a hard pass.
Yeah.
You can wait for streaming. Yep. You can wait for the dollar theater if those still exist. A $5 bit my tongue. $5 Tuesday.
Yep. Like a matinee of some sort.
Yeah. Wait for a cheaper showing.
Yeah.
I can't definitively say you need to see this movie. Like this is a movie that you will enjoy seeing. I know there's people out there that have enjoyed this immensely, and I wish I could say I had the same experience.
Yeah. I would have to go with a hard pass as well, just because it's a decent action movie, and it was enjoyable just on a standard like of action movies. But in terms of like it being the Justice League movie, like the first major Justice League movie, it was a little disappointing at the least.
At the least, yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's not on the same level as Batman v Superman disappointing, but it's just very lackluster, and it feels like they did just butcher this thing, or I shouldn't say butcher, but they just thinned this thing down to the Justice League plot. Like they got rid of all the fluff.
I was hoping for it to be so much more than what it was. And so, yeah, I would recommend that. I mean, you can probably just wait until like a matinee, or just wait until like it's on streaming services or out, so you can go out and rent it from a Redbox or what have you. But I don't feel it's a must see at all.
Yeah, and so with Justice League, we don't have a set sequel yet. There used to be a plan where Justice League and Justice League 2 were literally coming out back to back. Like it was supposed to be coming out in, I think, June or November of 2018 for Justice League 2. Like they were going to film the movies back to back. But because of the reception of Batman v Superman and all the stuff that happened with Zack Snyder's, I think it was his daughter who passed away, that's part of the reason why they cut the cliffhanger ending, is because they did not have the time or the budget or the means to film these movies back to back. And obviously DC was being very optimistic about the reception of Batman v Superman and the state of where the DC movie universe was going. And what happened with Batman v Superman and what happened with Suicide Squad, clearly they're like course correcting and trying to get back on track.
Right. I just feel like that's just going to be a constant state of theirs, though. I don't think they're going to be able to get on track. I
feel like their solo movies have kind of found a track with Wonder Woman, but obviously that's a very small sample size, because their solo movies have been Man of Steel, which is fine. It's not the best interpretation of Superman ever, but it has its moments. Then we have Batman v Superman, which is not good. Then you have Suicide Squad, which is very not good. Then you have Wonder Woman, which is very good.
Right.
And then you have Justice League, which is very meh.
Yeah, it's just kind of all over the place.
Yeah. And now our next trip into this DC movie universe is going to be Aquaman in December 2018. And it's going to be directed by James Wan, which all accounts on this movie so far has been that it's a very fun movie. And it should be pretty good. There's not any extensive reshoots that are scheduled right now. Everything seems to be going pretty well. I believe principal photography has even finished wrapping, which means this is going to be like one of the first movies that DC has done where they haven't had to go back and do massive reshoots and then add the post-production visual effects afterward.
Right. Which I'm looking forward to having a bit more of that character building for Aquaman, because I feel like he didn't really get it at all in Justice League.
Yeah, he had a couple of moments, like he had the Steve Trevor lasso of truth joke played on him,
right?
And then other than that, he was basically just broke one man, where he was just kind of muscle bound dude who isn't going to help out because strongest man is strongest alone.
In the movie, he just seemed very flat as a character.
Yeah, and I think they just wanted to play up his badassness. Look at how buff Aquaman is.
Well, I mean, obviously he has that look. I mean, especially since it's Jason Momoa, but like as a character, he didn't have that going for him. Yeah,
they didn't really develop the character as much as they probably should have. But I'm excited for Aquaman. I do like Jason Momoa's interpretation. It's very fun, very no pun intended, very fluid. Mm-hmm. And then they did mention the fact that, like, Batman asks him twice, do you talk to fish? I hear you can talk to fish.
Right.
And then he kind of plays it off. He's like, the water
does the
talking. So like he's able to manipulate the water to talk to the fish. So the water acts like a universal translator for them, which was a very interesting way of explaining it.
Right.
And then the next movie we have after that is actually a fairly quick turnaround from Aquaman to Shazam in April 2019, which again, Shazam now having Zachary Levi and they cast the kid. What the heck was it? Asher Angel?
I've never heard of him.
Asher something. Yeah. He's from a Disney Channel show called Andy Mack. I have not watched that show, so I don't know, but he's a young kid. But Zachary Levi's in it. I'm sold. I'm going to go see this movie. Plus, by April 2019, and we're probably still going to be doing this podcast.
Hopefully it goes the same route. The enjoyable
standalone movie, yeah. Yep. And then obviously we've discussed Wonder Woman, which is coming out later in 2019 in November. Cyborg standalone movie is scheduled for April 2020. Personally, I have no desire to see a standalone Cyborg movie. I don't know any of his villains. I don't know anything about him other than the fact that he's a living cyborg / mother box sort of thing.
Yeah.
I didn't like the design of like his hands and his feet. His hands look really weird. I don't know I don't know who signed off on that.
They were very Terminator-ish.
They were bulkier Terminator hands.
Yeah.
It was really weird. I was just going to move on to the next one. So if you have a thought on Cyborg, go ahead.
I did think it was kind of cool though that like because of like his conception of like being made from like one of the mother boxes essentially.
Oh, I thought you were talking about his conception of his mom and his dad. That would have been weird.
No. It was kind of cool that like his body like evolves.
Yeah.
Like it repairs itself. It'll put itself back together. It'll upgrade itself as needed. I thought that was kind of cool.
Yeah, and it's interesting to say the least, but I don't know if the character of Cyborg can carry a movie on his own. I've always viewed Cyborg more as a supporting character. Mm-hmm. He's supposed to be a character that has he's willingly submitting to his loss of humanity, although he still has it. He just kind of is segregating himself from the world or separating himself from the world because he no longer fits in as a 90% robotic person. So,
which I could agree with. And I guess we'll have to see.
That could make a pretty interesting character movie, but at the same time, it's a superhero movie, so it's eventually going to break down into Cyborg punching someone who is more than likely just going to be another cyborg or robot person.
Who knows? Only
DC knows, and I'm sure they don't know either. And then July 24th of 2020 is Green Lantern Corps. We know very little about this. All we know is that there's going to be more than one Green Lantern. Hopefully it'll be Hal Jordan and Jon Stewart and a bunch of other Green Lanterns. DC better up the budget on this one. The only real big problem I have with this is that David Goyer is behind the screenwriting, the story, and he's a heavy producer on this. David Goyer is the guy who he had a small hand in The Dark Knight, which obviously is a great comic book movie, and
right,
just a great movie in general. But then they kind of gave him the full reins on Man of Steel to co-write that with Zack Snyder, and then I think he also had a bigger hand in writing The Dark Knight Rises, and those have not been good. He also did Blade Trinity, which was also not good. So I don't know why Warner Brothers keeps giving him work, because his work is very subpar. He must be sleeping with the right people as far as I'm concerned. After that, they've just kind of announced a bunch of other movies, but they have nothing slated. They have Batgirl, which will be directed and written by Joss Whedon. There's supposed to be The Batman coming with Jeff Johns, writing a story with Matt Reeves, and Ben Affleck coming back as Batman.
That's actually still on the fence from last bit that I read.
The last I read, he's on board, but it's a fluctuating and it's a day-to-day thing. So we'll see what actually happens. There's a Flashpoint movie coming out, which, depending on how Justice League actually does, may or may not happen, because if Justice League performs well in the box office, I think they'll push Flashpoint back, because they're not going to want to change much other than maybe Ben Affleck.
Which just makes me wonder, like, who then they would go with.
I feel like if they do a Flashpoint, they have to course correct and make Batman younger. Just because starting this universe with an old Batman makes no sense, because Batman has to be one of your cornerstone pieces.
Yep.
Your cornerstone pieces are Superman, Wonder Woman, and Batman. And starting with an old Batman makes no sense.
Right, and it's just weird, though, in my opinion, because are they going to have a Nightwing movie?
They have announced a Nightwing movie. They've also announced Justice League Dark. They've announced Gotham City Sirens, which is going to be directed by the Suicide Squad director, David Ayer. But Nightwing already has a director and a screenwriter attached. The director is Chris McKay. I'm not too familiar with his work. And then there's a bunch of just untitled announcement movies as well. But none of these have any dates. There's Suicide Squad 2, which is, they did get Gavin O'Connor to come in and direct this. I believe he was the guy who did The Raid and The Raid 2, if I remember correctly. There's a Black Adam movie starring The Rock. There's a Deadshot movie. I was almost at Deadpool. Deadshot movie starring Joe Manganiello as Deathstroke, directed by Gareth Evans. There's Harley Quinn and the Joker. There's a Justice League sequel. There's apparently a Lobo movie, and then they still have to do Man of Steel 2. There's so many things coming out with the DC universe, but they have no real vision for this. They just know they want to make these movies, and they just announce them, and they aren't trying to connect them, but they want to bring it all together for Justice League, and it's just it's a giant cluster of nonsense.
At least they're consistent with their inconsistency.
Yeah. Well, I mean, unless there's more you want to talk about or you want to mention, those are all my talking points. And the DC universe, the state of the DC universe is, we'll see what happens with Justice League. Because if Justice League performs well and they make like quadruple their $300 million budget, we will probably see more of the same. But if I think Justice League has to break $1 billion. And at this point, they're not even projected to break $100 million in opening weekend, which is ridiculous for a Justice League movie.
Yeah.
I think DC has the more popular characters. Everyone knows Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman. Seeing them on screen together should be amazing. And I think
I didn't feel that.
No, there wasn't that real sense of joy and amazement. I think we have maybe our best modern iteration of Superman in this movie, but at the same time, it really feels forced. So I think Flashpoint is still on, just because I don't think Justice League, I think it maybe closes out at about $750 million, but I don't think it's going to make as much money because it's not going to get the word of mouth that Wonder Woman did.
And could go like a couple different ways too, where if it doesn't do well, then maybe they'll revise their plans and actually get their shit together for their upcoming movies, or it could just mean that a lot of these are just going to be scrapped entirely.
Which I would venture to guess that option, the latter. I think they'll do Flashpoint and they'll just course correct with a Flashpoint movie and reset the movie universe. Probably keep Gal Gadot as Wonder Woman and just recast everything else and just start from scratch from there. But Derek, thanks so much for making the trip out here and being on the podcast again. You're on Twitter, so if you feel like sharing that out, feel free.
I keep a very limited social media presence.
So yeah, you can try and find him. I follow him. If you want to stalk him a little bit, that's fine by me. You can find me on Twitter at Josh_Scar. Scar is spelled SKAAR. You can follow the podcast on Twitter at Talking Smack Pod. Smack is SMAC, superheroes, movies, animation, comics. And you can also email your comments. Did you enjoy Justice League? Did you hate it? Are you somewhere like us, more in between? Email us your thoughts, your opinions.
Even if you disagree, please do.
Just, be nice. We're only sharing our opinions. We're not trying to say this is the worst movie ever or this is the most disappointing movie ever. For me, it fell somewhere in between. But again, with what I'm restraining ourselves to with the 2 ratings of must see or hard pass, Justice League is a hard pass because, again, I didn't get enough out of it to say you should go see this movie. That's just my opinion. You're entitled to yours. If you got something more out of it, wonderful. That's great. But yeah, you can email us at tsmackpod@gmail.com. Again, find us on Facebook and YouTube as well. Derek, thank you again very much for being on the show.
Fun as always.
And roll that theme music.